Welcome back to another episode of The Shop. If you've been following our series, you'll know that we're busy preparing our Lexus LX470 over here to go overlanding. We've added a rooftop tent and about to install a set of drawers into the back of the Lexus. The rooftop tent is a couple of £100 and the drawers a couple of hundred more. And if you have watched our episode on adding a dual battery, you'll know that we're fighting really hard to keep our AHC or automatic height control. Now I'm quite keen to keep our automatic height control because usually in off-road vehicles the first thing I'll do is put in a 2-inch lift kit. Now there are advantages and disadvantages in lifting the vehicle. The first challenge with lifting a vehicle is that as the center of gravity raises, it becomes less stable on the road, which is what you don't want when you're doing high speed. But when you are on the off-road, you get better approach and departure angles. And Lexus has done a really good job of the automatic height control, which I believe is kind of right in between, giving us the best of both worlds. So right now, this Lexus is at the low position. Now if I raise it to the normal position, you'll see that this gap increases over here, and the vehicle raises up about 2 inches. This is the normal position that we'd be traveling down the highway on, which keeps the body down a little bit lower. It's great for doing highway speeds, and it allows just enough articulation here, but it's not so good on the approach and on the cone over and departure angles over here. Now if we raise the suspension up to the high position, what you'll see is we gain another 2 inches over here. So it's almost the same as putting a 2-inch lift kit in when we're in the high position, and we can use this high position to go off-roading. So I'm really keen to keep this automatic height control. It gives me the ability to add a 2-inch lift kit whenever I need it, but when we go into the normal driving position, what you will see is that it lowers itself back down again. And when we go along on the highway, we have the benefit of lowering the center of gravity, which makes the vehicle a lot more stable. So for me personally, I'm going to keep automatic height control. Now with the added load of the rooftop tent and the drawers that we'll be putting in shortly, our AHC is topping out on its ability to lift the Lexus. In other words, we're at the maximum weight that the AHC can handle. So there's really a couple of ways around this. The first is obviously get rid of AHC and put the lift kit in. Now a lift kit has, as we discussed earlier, the disadvantage of always being high and usually a little bit of a rougher ride because you add stiffer springs. The other way to do it is to up the regular springs to a slightly stiffer spring, which can also work and would be my second choice if I needed to get around the problem. What I want to do today actually is to install these air helper springs. So this is a 4124 kit specifically for the Land Cruiser or Lexus Land Cruiser 100 series. Now inside of the kit are these airbags, and what you do is you install them inside of the coil spring. And as you add air pressure to this, it transfers some of the load off the automatic height control and onto the air spring. Now the reason I've decided to go with air helper springs is that we can adjust the amount of assist that is given to the springs. And we do that by adjusting the air pressure inside of here. So when we're unladen or lightly laden, we can let some of the air pressure out and enjoy that slightly softer ride. And then when we load up to go on a trip, what we do is we add air pressure into the helper spring, and that transfers a lot of the load off the AHC and onto the air helper spring, which is perfect. And then when we're done, we let the air pressure back out again, and we have a slightly softer, more comfortable ride. So I'm going to go and test this out. I think this is the right solution for me, and today what we're going to do is install these air helper springs. Right, before we get started, a couple of things to note up front here. First of all, we've raised the vehicle into its highest position and then turned off the automatic height control. We don't want it accidentally coming down for any reason. The other thing we've done is we've locked our center differential. Now our rear wheels will be in the air, so locking the center differential means that the parking pole is still engaged on the front wheels, which is probably wise while we have the rear wheels in the air. In addition, we're going to go underneath and chock the front wheels just to make sure that there is no chance of it sliding. Right, so underneath the Lexus you can see what we're going to be doing today. Here is the bump stop. We need to get a socket inside of there and remove the bump stop. And then inside of this base plate over here you can see there's a hole. That is where the outlet of the airbag will be. So we'll need to jack up the car to open these coil springs as much as we can and then slide the airbag inside of there once the bump stop is out. So I'm going to go ahead now and try and remove this bump stop first and do the same on the other side. Right, first things first, what we've gone and done is jacked up the Lexus and then let the suspension stand on these jack stands over here. Next thing we did is removed the wheels on both sides, and then we undid the stabilizer bar here by undoing the bolts both on this side and on that side. Now our kit says that we still need to undo our panhard bar over here, and then we need to undo our shock absorber over here to let this whole thing down. Now I read one other video where they actually worked just in between the coil spring here at full droop. So I want to try that first. So the next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and use my number 12 socket over here, or 12mm socket, and see if I can remove this bump stop from the coil. Right, so I've read pretty much every article I can find on air helper springs, and basically you get two types. This one here is made by Firestone and the other one is made by Air-Rite. Now Firestone's instructions say that you need to install the air spring with the connector pointing upwards, and that you have to fit the hose through the upper spring perch. Now according to the Firestone, you're supposed to run the hose through this hole over here. Pretty sure you can hear it, but that's a threaded hole, and so this hose is going to run against the threads that are up there in the spring perch. Now if you're installing the Air-Rite version of this, it requires the airbag to be installed this way around with a connector at the bottom. What you do is you drill out this hole over here at the bottom of the spring perch so that the fitting can fit through. And what I do like about that is that the spring, the air helper spring, is always going to be in this position. That's where it's going to sit. So in looking through this, what I've decided to do is to follow the Air-Rite helper, the Air-Rite advice. And I'm going to drill this hole out larger than this nub over here and install it that way around. The other point that Firestone makes is that you have to take this bump stop and you have to cut it shorter. And I'm not exactly clear to where, but I suspect it is to this line over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this bump stop shorter, and then I'm going to reinstall it just in a shorter position over here. What it'll mean is it makes slightly earlier contact with the airbag than the Air-Rite, and I think that is what's intended for this Firestone application. So if you look at the instructions that come with the air helper spring, it says to trim the overload bumper after the 4th convoluted section. Now you'll see that my overload bumper only has 2 convoluted sections, so I don't quite know where to trim it. Now before I took the wheels off and raised the Lexus up, standing on the suspension in the high position, I measured 250mm from the bottom spring perch to the top spring perch. Measured the air helper spring, it's 200, which means that there is a 50mm gap between the top spring perch and the top of the air helper spring. So if you take a look at this air helper spring over here, you will see that that top convoluted section is 30mm, this section over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this bumper at this 30mm mark here. What that means is that the air automatic height control will take over the full load when it goes into the high position, but in the normal position it's going to drop down approximately 2 inches, which is approximately 50mm, and then this air helper will be helping. So when we're driving down the highway, our air helper will help the automatic height control take some of the load off of it, but when we full off-road, that automatic height control will have to be carrying the full load. Now, I could be wrong in doing this, and it might be best to have it just contacting the surface over there, which would mean trimming it at 50mm, which is there. I don't know which way to go yet, and so for now I'm going to trim this rather slightly shorter. It'll be easier to trim using this existing line than using an imaginary line through this bump stop over there. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this off over here. If I am wrong, what I would need to do is to add in a 20mm spacer there, and I'll probably just buy some aluminum plate and just add in 20mm of aluminum plate to drop this back down again. So I'm going to go ahead and measure this just that I've got this for reference in case I need it. But right now, next thing I'm going to do, trim this bumper off over here and then start the installation of the air helper. So I'm going to now cut this stop over here. I was going to use my reciprocating saw, but I decided to rather just use a regular hacksaw. And of course, if you're cutting rubber, best thing is to have some soapy water. So I'm just going to get this soaped up and then slowly start cutting it. Now if the cutting goes badly, I'll break out the reciprocating saw and finish it, but I'm going to at least start with the hacksaw. Right, so I finished up this cut over here. It didn't come out perfectly. You saw I took the Stanley knife just to level that section off over there where it was a bit of a bump. It's not great, but it'll work just fine. Just remember that the airbag will be resting against that, so it'll be able to accept the shape much easier than if it were a solid steel section that it was up against. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to now go ahead and bolt this back into the Lexus. Right, so we're going to be installing this airbag this way around, and as you'll see at the bottom here, it's got this nub with the push to connect fitting that's installed over there. Now this push connect fitting only just fits in that hole over there. It's a really tight fit, but it fits in there. So what I want to do is drill that hole out to the size of that nub. Now I've gone ahead and measured it, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my jobber drill bit here and just drill into that plate over there until I can get hopefully all the way through, but at least to the 1 inch mark, which is that step over there. So I'm going to grab the step drill now and drill that. Alright, I'm going to start installing my Airline. Now one thing to note is I use a proper Airline cutter to cut airlines. What I have found is that if you cut the Airline with a knife, you tend to cut it skew, and then when you install it into the push to connect fitting, the camera probably doesn't show it very well, but only this little piece here actually seals, and so if it's cut skew, it's very prone to leaking. So a good Airline cutter will ensure that when you cut the hose, you actually cut it square, and it's a nice clean cut that comes out there. So you'll see a nice square clean cut. So recommended that you use an Airline cutters. Definitely don't use a side cutters, because that will squish the hose, and when it squishes the hose it doesn't seal either. So I recommend using a proper Airline cutters to cut airlines. I'm fortunate that I do have one, but you could use a knife. Just make sure you're doing square cuts. So this side is now complete. We've got the airbag in, we've got the rubber puck installed, and we've run the Airline to the rear of the vehicle. Now if we have a look over here on the front end, here is the hose which we've run, and we've zip tied it up onto this upper control arm over here. This here is a little bit of concern because it might rub down here. So I've put this braided sleeving on in this section over here just to protect the Airline hose. I think it's high enough out of the way for rocks. We're not going to do extreme rock hauling with this rig. It's more an overlanding rig, so I think that'll be just fine over there, well protected and out the way. Right, we're going to get cracking on the other side here, doing exactly the same as we did. I'm not going to walk you through the details of what we did on the other side. It's exactly the same, so let's get this side installed. So at the back here, all I've done is just zip tie these two ports to my trailer connector over here. Now this is not my style of doing things, and this is definitely not where I'm going to end with this. What I'd ultimately like to do is install an air pump with gauges that I can view from the front of the Lexus. I just don't have the funds to do that right now, so for now I'm going to zip tie these over here, and then as the time goes by and I can afford to buy that air pump with the automatic control, I am going to reroute these to wherever I install the air. Right, one thing we just want to do before we finish up is just make sure all the wheel studs are at torque. I had a look and it's a bit unclear. Most references I seem to find indicate 97 foot-pounds, so my torque wrench is set to 97 foot-pounds, and I'm going to just do a torque one, skip one, torque one, skip one, torque one, skip one. So a skip pattern on each of these until I get them done. So I'll start here. And then this one over here, for some reason on this Lexus, has a different lug nut, which I'll be fixing soon because I don't like it, but we'll talk it up nonetheless. Right, and then I always like to just go back and double check to make sure I haven't missed anyone. So we do it from this side. Skip one, skip one, skip one, last one. Right, I'm going to shoot off to the other side and torque the other side up. Right, we've aired the bags up, and this side is at 5 psi. It's just making contact. In fact, if I put my fingers in there, I can actually pull it away. So it's just making contact with the bump stop. And remember that my AHC is in the high position right now. So very little assist in the high position at 5 psi. Down at the bottom, it's making good contact on that plate. On this side, I've got this bag aired to 9 psi, and as you can see, it's sitting very tightly over there, but up at the top here, it's actually tight. I can't get my fingers in there. I can still move it away slightly, but it is making contact. So 9 psi gives me some assistance here for the AHC. So depending on how the loading goes, I might keep these at around 9 psi, but I'll play around with them a little bit and see how it goes. Right, I've got both airbags set at 9.5 psi in the up position. That's going to go up just a little bit as we lower back down to the normal ride height, so I might still adjust that a little bit more. The next thing that I want to do is go under the front and adjust the torsion bars to add a little bit of support in the front axle. The only way you can do that is by adjusting the torsion bars up, so I'm going to go ahead and give it 2 turns up. Now that we've got the rear figured out, what I want to do is raise the torsion bars. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is take my marker pen over here and make a mark on this nut so that I know this is where we started. And then I have this large socket that I'm going to use to rotate this nut. So this is a 30mm socket, and I've got a 3/4 inch drive here, and if this bar handle isn't long enough, I'll just put a cheater bar on, but let's see if we can get this thing to rotate. Yep, it does it quite easily. So I'm just going to lift this up until my mark comes all the way around back to where it was, a little more. So I've given it 1 turn. That went really easily. Right, so on the passenger side I'm going to do exactly the same. Create my reference mark over here, and now I will turn. There we go. So back to alignment here. Right, now we're all set up and ready to do this side, so I'm going to give this one more turn. Right, so marks are back to align. We've given this side 2 turns. I'm going to go and do the last turn on the other side. So we've already got our mark here. It'll be pretty easy. I'm just going to grab this. And there we go. Marks aligned. So we've done 2 turns on both sides. And that should make a big difference, just transferring some weight off the automatic height control and actually into the torsion bars where it's meant to be.
After installing the air springs, we took the Lexus out on a camping trip, and what I found was that even fully inflated, the air springs were unable to support the fully loaded Lexus. We were lucky enough to find a set of Land Cruiser 80 series springs, which we installed, and this has solved our problem, and we are now able to carry the fully laden Lexus.
They'll try to kick you while you're down. They wanna rise up while you drown. They wanna fill your head with doubt. They're silently scared that you'll figure it out. I'll make it look like I'm losing. Won't bother hiding my bruises. And when they finally think you're wounded, then it's your chance to be ruthless.